Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you all had a good Father's Day weekend. I did. It was great just to spend time with family. My kids got me a new pressure washer. The one I had finally kind of given up. And so there's been a lot of things that have had 3,000 pounds per square inch of water applied to them just with the new fun toy. But here's what we got for today, the plan for today. We've got a couple of things to be talking about. One is a big eastern ridge that's driving all of the heat that you see in this area. We're going to see how long that's going to last. Coming around the periphery of that, it's going to be a lot of moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico and the Bay of Campeche, and also like major drought-busting rains for the drought that's in parts of Mexico. But the flow is coming around a broader trough like this to hit that ridge, and this is meaning a lot of flow coming into the upper Midwest, northern plains. It's going to result in some very heavy rainfall. That's just in the near term. And don't forget, on the back side of this, winter storm warnings have been issued for parts of the northern Rockies. We've got frost and freeze warnings that dip pretty far down here to the south through parts of the Great Basin, getting up into this section of Oregon. There's also red flag warnings that stretch throughout this area. So that's just the near term. What we're going to talk about after this is where the pressure patterns are setting up for the month of July. So as we walk through the next 2 weeks, getting us to the end of June, it's going to be about, can we see this pattern going back on repeat or not? And I'm going to try to answer that question late in these slides down here. I'm also going to compare 3 long-range models for July. We're going to look at the new JMA forecast as well, and I'll finish with a bit on some international weather. So there you go. That's your all hazards weather map this morning at 6 a.m. And the big story is just going to be the flow. So take a look at how this is setting up. We've got a deep low that's way up here near the Hudson Bay. And finally, after months of not seeing this, there is large center of high pressure that's on the East Coast. And it has done several things. It is what's helped push this would-be tropical system that National Hurricane Center is given a really high probability of developing toward Mexico, toward Texas, increasing the flood threat. And you can see just the flow of moisture that's going to ride through this until it comes up right in through this area where it's going to grab the flow around the upper level low and give us multiple days of thunderstorms across the northern tier of the U.S. In the west, we can already see the flow here coming along the west coast in the opposite direction. That's what's going to drive a lot of cooler air into the Pacific Northwest. But there's quite a bit of dry air down to the south, which is why we have those red flag warnings. So again, the main question, the story is, how long do we see this? And does this continue on repeat as we approach summer? And I'm going to take a stab at that here in just a few moments. Here's what we're breaking away from. Since May 1, I just picked the beginning of May just to do this analysis. You know, I've talked about this many times. It's been more about the high pressure that's been forming here and here, forcing the trough that is over Alaska to drive the flow in like this. So this is a surface pressure anomaly map. This is not a 500 millibar height map, that looks at the troughs and ridges. This is a surface pressure map. So we can see lows that keep curling up here. And, they keep coming around this part of Alaska. And that's what's driven our pattern. And it's, important to note what's not been here. The Bermuda high, which can normally sit in this area, has been weakened and displaced. At times it's been over the Hudson Bay. It's been at times shoved into northern Europe. But the point is to say this. For the last, 45 days, the Atlantic has not produced high pressure, big areas of high pressure that have sat where they typically sit. So if you want to know what is most important to watch, it's summertime. So we need to be paying attention to the retreat of the jet stream to the north into Canada. We need to be paying attention to where high pressure begins to become established and what that might mean going forward with kind of getting the pattern stuck at times. That's my concern. All right, so here it is. This is the new artificial intelligence forecast system. We're looking at surface pressure anomalies. So these would be where there's higher than average pressure. This would be where there's lower than average pressure. And this is this morning right here. Okay, playing forward, this is the large extension of what we would call the Bermuda high working its way into the East Coast throughout the middle of this week. After the heavy rain at the beginning of the week rolls through the upper Midwest, higher pressure attempts to build in behind this. So this is linking together quite a bit of high pressure following what will be very, very heavy rain in this area. I'll show you that more in a few moments. We then see the tropical system that's spinning here, could be our first named system if it does end up developing. But the models are a bit kind of conflicted on where it's going to go. You'll see the model differences in a few moments. The European model whole suite, not just the artificial intelligence, but the ensemble and the as well as the artificial intelligence, there is a push more toward the Mexico side with the low pressure than the Texas side. And you'll see what that means in just a few moments here. But as I play this out through the 20th and 21st, getting us to our solstice, I'm waiting to see how long this high pressure lasts. So we knew it was going to be around for 8 or 9 days, and we've already started that time frame. But already by next Saturday, we see a low breaking into the Great Lakes states. We see that high pressure cell kind of getting, beat back and going farther. We notice that it doesn't seem to be returning in the models until the end of June. When we get out there to the very end of June, we start to see it showing up again. Now, if we keep the pattern away from leaving high pressure in place permanently, then it's going to be that hot and stormy look that I've talked about for everywhere east of the Rocky Mountains. I think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to see a lot of just storm clusters, and that's the idea. We've kind of had that idea for a couple of months now. I want to be careful not to just keep confirming my own biases in this pattern, but I see it coming back. Like I don't see, look at this. You see this? This is already by the 24th, 25th. The pressure drops again. But then the atmosphere opens back up to more high pressure. And if it keeps oscillating back and forth, we will get the heat, especially throughout the Corn Belt, the south, the southeast, the east. This whole area will get the heat, but I think it storms. I think this is a year where we get hot and we get stormy for a lot of folks in the main grain belts of the United States and the Canadian prairie. Now, in the West, what this tends to mean we stay away from significant long duration heat, especially in the Pacific Northwest. Now, California, Central Valley into the Southwest will get hot. And we will be watching for times for these high pressure cells to work their way in to like Texas. And when that does happen, because it will happen this summer, we'll open up the Southwest monsoon again. But I think the Southwest monsoon will be more sporadic this year than just this thing that starts and doesn't stop. So if you would like to know the theme for everything else I'm going to cover today, this is where it starts. All right. Okay, so how about this weekend? Through 6 a.m., just looking back at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precip. A lot of isolated, but some very large storms in the southeast. So you had some rain moving through the northeast here, coming through the mid-Atlantic. But already we've seen some heavy rain, including some pretty nasty, severe storms that came out of the plains in Nebraska. And then the rain extending here into parts of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. We also had another storm system that rolled through the Canadian prairie, and spending all of last week there, I can tell you there are several places here that have been quite wet. I was excited to see some storms that made it through this part of Illinois. It's been extremely dry in this kind of corner of Illinois, and to get some storm action in there was good. But overall, that's your pattern for the last 7 days, and it's about to make a bit of a shift. So to show you just this morning as the sun was rising, got some pretty thick fog on the backside here, large complex of storms rolling through already through the western Corn Belt, getting into the upper Midwest. And yesterday they looked something like this. So just as the sun was setting, we can see these large storms popping here in the plains. A lot of this is still wildfire smoke from Mexico from the last several weeks. Deep convection over the southeast, and here's the northern edge of this tropical low pressure system that's coming out of the Caribbean into the Bay of Campeche and the Gulf of Mexico. At the very end of this animation, it becomes a bit easier to see the smoke from the wildfire that's here in Southern California. A lot of news coverage of that over the weekend, I'm sure you saw. And here's the deeper trough that's in the northwest. And that's the makeup of this pattern in the near term. So real quick, what are we looking at? Storm Prediction Center today, broad area of that they've given a slight risk of severe storms. We think that tomorrow it stretches really from parts of western Ontario all the way down through Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas. Keep an eye on that region. And then on Thursday, not Thursday, the 19th, that'd be this Wednesday, you can get the idea of where the flow is going to come around. And there's moisture in the system. There's moisture in this, which means storms will pop along the periphery of wherever that ridge is. All right? So already this morning, we're keeping an eye again. This is just live lightning strikes about 6 a.m. this morning, rolling right in through this area from that pretty active band of thunderstorms. And looking here on radar, this is what they've looked like through the early morning hours. So we're getting this up here and just seeing where these storms are just after sunrise. And I just show you that because it's a pretty good initialization on our models this morning as to where the storm clusters are. So let's pick it up at 7 o'clock. Just kind of play through the remainder of the day today. So again, this flow is doing this. And as you just take a look at that, let's put some arrows on this so we can kind of get a better idea. We'll watch the storms in a pretty broad area. Also, the advection of moisture across the south, popping storms. And then some of this, as this comes down with some pretty cold air over the Rocky Mountains, we're going to see the risk of snow. And we've already seen in this area where the the National Weather Service has issued winter storm warnings in this region. So this is through this evening, playing into early tomorrow morning on Tuesday, getting out there till Tuesday afternoon and evening. So again, we're going to watch that corridor. Remember on Tuesday, right there, as one low goes over toward Ontario and the Hudson Bay. And then there is the moisture coming out of the tropical pulse that you can see the southern cutoff of the NAM there, but there's that pulse of moisture. So playing into Wednesday and parking this out there about Wednesday midday. Isolated showers and storms here, left over from the system that rolled through. High pressure is about to build in this area, but look at the rain down here. This could be incredibly heavy rain. Now, the National Hurricane Center, let's see if they've given an update on this. It's still the 1 a.m. update. I'm a little too early. They gave this a 70% chance of development as it goes forward. They're also watching this disturbance that's just off the southeast coast. They've given a 30% chance of developing. And I was watching on satellite just how deep the convection was here over the last 18 hours or so. And I just want to point out to you, this is some deep, deep convection that's over the Yucatan Peninsula and moving its way into the Bay of Campeche. Now, something just to think about here. This time of year, we have this feature called the Caribbean Gyre or the Mexican Gyre, and it's literally low pressure forming just on the heat that's in this area. And this is what's helping to spur on this deep convection. So we're going to watch for this to potentially spin up right in this area as we go forward. All right. So as I'm about to show you where I think the models are going to take this rainfall, let's just get a quick glance as to where things have been. This is our last couple of weeks. And again, this is a percent of normal map. As we watch where that high pressure is going to be building in and where the heat is going to be greatest, there's going to be several areas in here that are going to be moving their way toward a flash drought scenario. Remember, the storms are going to fire best on the periphery of that high, not within it. There will be isolated convection within it, isolated, but it's just important to note these pockets that for the last few weeks have been on the drier side of things. Remember, though, this map only goes up till Sunday at 7 a.m. It's got a one-day quality control lag on it, so that's why you can't see some of the rain we did get over the weekend in these areas. So another thing to point out is where the heaviest rains are coming. We've already got flooding issues here because of saturated soils, but I wanted to take note of some of the eastern Corn Belt over to the Carolinas and Mid-Atlantic dryness that we've been dealing with as of late. So let's add one more map to this. It would be our ranks map going back just for the last month, so May 16 to June 16. And where that heaviest rain is coming in here, we've already been very, very wet in this corridor. And just take note where the heat is going to be piling in right in through this area. We've been drier. So this is starting to get a lot of folks concerned. Many I've talked to in this area would say, no, let's bring on the heat. We could use 6 or 7 days of just good temperatures in the mid 90s to really pound into this crop that could help it. But a few of these areas that have been drier, this could pose a stress to some of that crop. So out west, just to take note, the last month has been very dry for California, some of the driest on record. And what this has driven here is the risk of these wildfires, and that's why they have the red flag warnings out for the Central Valley of California with this setup. So let's start talking about amounts. We're going to start on the snow side of this. This is the WPC's 72-hour forecast for the chance of getting 2 inches of snow. And it's going to be very difficult to predict the amounts, and it'll be entirely elevation dependent, and this will be at higher elevation, but this is just a good way to look at where we think the heaviest snows are possibly going to be as this deep trough kind of digs in here. We'll talk more about the temperatures in a few moments. But if we look at the latest artificial intelligence forecast, this goes out there 168 hours. We can tell just how wet this corridor is going to be, and you can see the AIFS bringing heavy rains into Mexico, but also into Texas, kind of linking it up into New Mexico as well, as that high pressure extends over into this area. Let's now add to that the national blend of models. This is their forecast through the next 7 days. Again, there are places possibly picking up well over 2 to 3 inches of rain right in this corridor, and then along the coast here, the chances for 6 to 10 inches are very high. Inside of that ridge, here it is, isolated convection. That's what we're watching for, isolated convection. Montana picking up some decent rain as well, so is part of the Canadian Prairie, which has already been quite wet. Let's add to this the WPC, very similar outlook to the NBM. Here's the European model forecast for the next 7 days. But take a look at the difference between the 0Z European and the 0Z GFS. And I'm focusing a lot here on this region, or down into Texas. My goodness, Texas is European versus GFS. In fact, to compare the two, this is what you get. So just take note, inside that ridge, the GFS is wetter. And with a more northerly track on that moisture, the GFS is substantially wetter into Texas. And there are pockets throughout the very active pattern here in the upper Midwest where we see mostly the European is wetter. That would be these colors. But a few areas in here where the GFS is really dumping a lot of rain. So it's just amazing to see this, but take note of Mexico. European is trying to break the drought in Mexico. So let's go ahead and have a look at the models quickly here. We're just going to play through this starting at 7 a.m. this morning, working our way out through Tuesday into Wednesday. There's the low that creates the severe storm risk here on Tuesday. You can see where it's going to be on Wednesday. And just watch the moisture coming out of Texas. This is getting into Thursday and Friday. Look at the difference. Just keep your eye on Texas from Wednesday through Friday on where the moisture is going to go in each map. And you can see that late this week, both models have a lingering front on which more rain is going to fall in through this corridor. But in that ridge, it's going to be isolated storms through the end of the week. Once we get out there past Friday into Saturday, this is the part where the system, the big ridge, begins to have its breakdown. And this is always kind of in the prediction, right? The ridge was going to be around for 7, 8, 9 days, and then something was going to come through. So here's the low going over the Great Lakes. Both models resolve it. On Sunday, you can see drop in the front in through that area, and that's going to push through, giving us some relief in that region. And at that point, heavy rain's coming into Florida. It's in both models. Another low is trying to sneak through the Canadian Prairie early next week. Both models are pretty good agreement here. But I'm just saying that I don't see a lack of moisture in this pattern. So I think we still get storms even inside of the big ridge. They're just going to be isolated. So over the next 7 days, what are the chances of grabbing an inch of rain according to the GFS? Very high in a few different areas, which we've talked about. Let's step it up to 2 inches. Better than 90% chance here and here. This, again, is the GFS. And better than 4 inches. Take a look at that region in through there. Now, if I flip this over to the European model, let's get their take. New model run just came in, so let's go back to the 0Z. Go out there to 10 or 7 days. That's what we were looking at. Notice the difference. The European model not carrying the heavy rain in through here, but certainly has the higher probabilities in the upper Midwest. Now, if we just had 4 more days onto this, let's take it out there. Whoops, that's 4 days. By the way, that was the chance of 4 inches. Now watch as I step this down. 2 and 1. We start to see the models beginning to fill in some of this area with better chances of storms. But it's storms. These are localized heavy rainfall events, not widespread rain for everybody that needs a drink. So it's important to know when I see hot and stormy, that is a recipe for flash drought in certain areas as well. Going out there and just getting an idea on where this pattern goes, I think my main story for you is this. Here's the large ridge. Could it break 600 decameters? Possibly. That would be way up there, several standard deviations away from the mean if we could make that occur. But as we play this out there, again, watch by this weekend. See what ends up happening? This is in all the models. We break the ridge down. It gets kind of flattened into Texas. This is what we could see that could help kind of give us some early kind of sporadic southwestern monsoon type flow. This is next weekend. But I see this pretty solid northward retreat of the jet stream, which is more north than average. And that's why I think we continue, even with the brief cool downs that this could bring, which is what we're expecting, that this is also going to be bringing in, storms, but it's not, it's going to keep the heat around. Did you notice what happens here at the end of June? We start to rebuild that ridge back into this area. So we get back into where I just kind of drew, didn't I? That's what we did at the beginning. So I think we're going to see this happening more often than not as we go forward in this pattern. And that's why the models are going to struggle with the week 2 outlook. Again, with the northward retreat of the jet, you can see it in both models here, the GFS and the European, these two here. But I look at this and I see plenty of moisture getting advected and pulled out of the Gulf of Mexico. And that's why I'm just hung up on this idea of being just hot and stormy as we progress through the end of June and working our way into July. So what about these temperatures? This is our frost outlook for the next 7 days. And now we can see why those frost advisories, watches, and warnings are out. And min temperatures, this was today's min temperatures, but take a look at tomorrow morning. Very cold throughout the Great Basin. Overnight lows here trying to get out of the 40s and upper 30s in cases. And a few high elevation places, we're going to be below freezing. But with all that moisture in the atmosphere and the heat on, low temperatures tomorrow morning in the mid 70s as far north as Chicago. So temperature-wise, on the high side of it, there's Monday's highs. Tuesday, very cool, but heat wave on around the Great Lakes, the East Coast. This is all cloud cover driven, why it's cool to the south. This is Wednesday. Again, take a look at these high temperatures here. Getting into Thursday, much cooler in the Central Plains as the storms come rolling through. This is Thursday, again, driven by the remnants of the cloud cover moving its way into this area. By Friday, the heat wave continues. But by Saturday into Sunday, this is where we start to see another wave of cooler air trying to back this off a bit. All right. Beyond that, the models do not agree. This is the 0Z GFS forecast day 5 through 10, planting a bunch of heat back in the west. This is day 10 through 15. And I don't think this is the case. This is way too cool in this area. I'm going to agree more with the European model. That's day 5 through 10 of the European. And this is day 10 through 15. This makes a whole lot more sense given that we think the flow is going to favor coming back to some sort of ridging off the East Coast, building into the Midwest over time. I think that's the way the end of the month shapes up, not the way the GFS suggested. So what's going on in the longer range? Well, let's go have a look at the new CPC update. This makes a lot of sense to me. This is their week 3, week 4, so that's June 29th to July 12th. A lot of heat in the system. That's the northward retreat of the jet. It's more north than usual. I'll figure out a way to show you that better later this week. But again, I think they're going to have just as much trouble as all of us at predicting the precip pattern. To be honest, I would say that when we do have the ridges building into the east, we will get a drier spot here. But I think at times that ridge flattens out farther to the south. And you're going, well, why isn't the south dry? Because the south has had just no trouble pulling in Gulf moisture. And I think when this occurs, we get this open area of thunderstorm clusters that comes in this region. So if I had to make some modifications, I would do that. The other part of the story is just the pressure pattern. In July, this is what the European extended forecast is suggesting for the whole month of July. And what is interesting about it is you notice that the European model is more focused on developing the much higher heights and bigger pressure anomalies with the ridge that's in the North Pacific. And a lot of this low pressure here, I think, is due more to heat than anything. I think the jet stream lives here all July long. And what I'm concerned about when I see this pattern is if we end up building high pressure here, and if they want to take a weakened high pressure cell and shove it a bit north there, we just have to be concerned over if at times this model is wrong and more high pressure lives in the midsection of the country. And I'm going to make a case for that in a second. But if you take the European model at face value, why is there so much low pressure here? Because it's hot. Let me take a look at that. That's the July temperature outlook from the European model. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't want to use this at all. This is the July precip forecast. It's too misleading at this point. This is going to be a hot and stormy July. And this model is not conveying that information at all. So let's start to build that case to let you know what I'm thinking. These ocean temperatures are beginning to reveal a few things. We spent some time at the end of last week talking about La Nina. Remember, La Nina's influence is coming. It's later this year. What I've noticed is that these waters have not stayed as cold, and the warmth that has been in here started to work its way, and there's a few pockets of warmer water showing up in the Gulf of Alaska. The Atlantic is just hot. And if we get high pressure coming around like this at times, we're going to open up this already juiced air out of the Gulf of Mexico into the United States. No trouble. But what I want to know is, does the jet just continue to live there? Remember, I made a case for it all last week. So here's what I'm thinking about. I'm going to pick on the Ohio River Basin, and I'm going to do that for a couple of reasons. One, sorry about that. That is where we've been a bit drier as of late, except in Kentucky, Tennessee, where we got very wet earlier in the month of May. But this kind of includes a broader area that I'm just going to define as kind of, this whole overall region. And the reason why I want to do that is because I'm curious, if you just look at all of these really hot Julys, I'm going to pick them all out, what had to happen? In those hot Julys, you got the triple ridge pattern. One ridge here. another large one over the Great Lakes Basin, and look at the Bermuda High, displaced into the North Atlantic. Now, you see, here's my problem with this pattern. I see a lot of this, but I have yet to see any evidence of large ridges of high pressure living over the Great Lakes, like just staying there for weeks on end, which is what happens whenever we get into a really, really major drought situation in the month of July. So it's not really been evidenced there. And one of the reasons is, in order to get this triple ridge pattern to show up, the atmosphere in June needs to be pushing ocean temperatures to look like this. We've got to get a lot of cold, cold water in this whole region and have La Nina developing and anchor the warmest water back here. And then have warm water there. So take a look. That's what happened in all of those years. And if you look at to get this stuck in your brain real quick, take a look at our current ocean temperatures. It's not quite there. And I think that's one of the reasons why developing and leaving a big area of high pressure here, which would be devastating to crops, isn't just in the works right now. And what I see instead is a northward retreat of the jet stream. I see thunderstorm clusters at times rolling over the top of that, or let me rephrase that, the ridge here. It's rolling over the top of the ridge is to the south of the jet stream. And the Gulf just supplying just hot and humid conditions nonstop. And that's because of this ocean temperature configuration out here. That is a case I could build. Now, remember, what do the models say? This is the July outlook for pressure anomalies according to the European seasonal forecast. And as you take a look at it, it's got a weakened Bermuda High. If you want to anchor big ridges over the Great Lakes, the Bermuda High has to be displaced north and be very strong. And this high has to be right here where it is, but very, very strong in this area, not higher over here. It's got to be strong there. And I'm just not seeing that just yet. And I think that's one of the reasons if we come into the United States and say, show me the precipitation pattern for, not the season, but the month. Let's go back. That's the July outlook. There's those thunderstorm clusters that I think we could see. And you're going, wait a minute, it's going to be dry in the Mid-South, right? No, I think it's going to roll through that area too. What does the NMME say? It's got a different look. It's trying to put the driest conditions up the west all the way along the Rocky Mountains, keeping the Gulf open, curing the drought in parts of Mexico. And it's got drier conditions here, but not dry throughout the Midwest. And so I want to give you one last piece of evidence here, and it's the JMA forecast, which was just released over the weekend. This is what I'm thinking about. Pressure anomalies at 850, that's the low levels of the atmosphere. Take a look at where they're putting the highest pressure compared to average. No strong Bermuda High. And as a result, hot, stormy. This seems to be making sense. And where are they anchoring the highest pressure? Take a look at the flow. You see the flow's coming in like that. They're trying to put it at some point late in the year, into the month of July, trying to put it down here. And as we look at all of this, that's why I still think hot, stormy is the way to go through the main kind of U.S. grain belt. I'm talking about the central U.S., down to the Gulf Coast, and all the way to the East Coast. That's the case I think that the models are building for me here. So keep that in the back of your head. We'll keep talking about the rest of the week. Last couple things to talk about are international weather. Globally, take a look at the temperatures. We can see that some of the really hot conditions in parts of Russia have backed off, but take a look just to the east of the Black Sea. Still very hot here, very hot in Turkey and Central Europe. Very hot in South America as well. Cooler in the Manchurian Plain. Very hot in the Ganges River Valley. Precipitation-wise, European model pulled back all that rain for this area over the next 10 days. That's a big section of Ukraine and this huge part of the western Russian wheat belt, the southern part, like the southern region here. Stormier to the north. The Mayu front continues. Wet weather on the Manchurian Plain where it's cooler. The Ganges River Valley hot and very, very dry. Rains throughout parts of Argentina and southern Brazil, but drier. The monsoon's been done for weeks, but just to point out the drier conditions going on right now with harvest. What I'll be watching most carefully is anything that's going to start developing here in July and how it makes its way across the Caribbean. Keep an eye on all of this as we progress forward in this pattern. So again, I covered a lot today, but I had a lot on my mind over the weekend. I hope you all have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.